Today in John's Gospel, we hear a snippet of that high priestly discourse of Jesus during the Last Supper. St. John is the loftiest of all the Gospel writers. The traditional symbol for John is that of an eagle, for his theology soars to great heights. So this morning, I would like to try to take us up on the wings of that eagle and contemplate the richness of this gospel reading. Now, I'm pretty inexperienced for taking you to such heights, so to be safe, I have borrowed from the thoughts of a more experienced pilot, that of Bishop Robert Barron. In particular, I would like to draw our attention on that sentence towards the end of the gospel reading. It was not you who chose me, but I who chose you. Today we hear about spiritualities from many sources, and for the most part they are grounded on the principle of seeking God. Our quest is for the meaning of life. Our longing is for peace. We seek, we find. Now, nothing is wrong with this, for this is what spiritual seekers have done since the beginning of time. But this approach represents something that is qualitatively different from authentic Christianity. Jesus tells us that our choices compared to God's are relatively insignificant. Our climbing of the holy mountain in the search for God is really not all that important. Here is what is important, what really matters, that God has searched us out, that God has chosen us. It is not you who have chosen me, but I who have chosen you. And when we get this right, we are on the path to holiness. Rather than concentrating and fussing on how we are going to find God, if we take up an attitude of, I'm going to abandon my will, I'm going to surrender, I'm going to allow myself to be found, then we enter into the will of God. Planning for a secure future is important, but I'm not going to get caught up in living my life in a tiny world of my plans, my projects, where I want to be in 5 years, or my 10-year plan. Bishop Barron refers to this attitude as being drawn up in my own ego drama, my life, my plans, or as Frank Sinatra would say, doing it my way. When we surrender ourselves to the will of God, we allow ourselves to play a role in the theodrama, where God is the producer and the director. When we surrender our life, our life is now part of the drama, the one that God has chosen me to play a role in. Most of us play our own part in our own ego drama. This is what I want. These are my plans. This life of gratifying the self is nothing compared to the excitement of a life of the theodrama, where we are drawn up in a story not of our own making, but as a role that God has chosen for us to play. And once this shift takes place in us, from the egocentric to the God-centered, it is then that our mission begins. And Jesus tells us this in the gospel, what that mission is. I have appointed you to bear fruit. And the fruit we bear is love. To love others as God loves us. We hear this in the second reading. God is love. Love is not just an attribute of God. Love is the essence of God. We have been chosen by love for the sake of bearing love to the world. Love is not a feeling. Love is an act of the will. Our mission to bear fruit will always take the form of love, willing the good for the other. So, let me see if I can land this high-soaring eagle, for we always have to come back down to earth. How do we unpack the height and depth of St. John's theology? The idea of surrendering ourselves to God sounds unrealistic, out of reach for Catholics in the 21st century. It may be the work for saints such as St. John or St. Augustine or St. Francis of Assisi, or perhaps that of a cloistered nun or a monk. And I agree with this. In order to shift our lives from the egocentric to the God-centered, it's not as easy as just flipping a switch. But it is important to begin with an attitude of surrender and allow God to direct our lives. And it is a process. For Rome was not built in a day. And Jesus has given us his church. He's given us the sacraments. The church has given us the Bible. I encourage all of us to set some time each day to pray, to reflect on this attitude of surrender. God's grace will strengthen our will and free us from bad habits and strengthen our virtues. When we change our habits, we change our lives. And this is the essence of what it means to be Christian, to truly be able to love God as God loves us, and to experience the joy, happiness, and peace. We must surrender our wills to his.